Yeah, nothing like a little surplus safety in the morning with your breakfast. I think they scheduled this for an early part of the day because this is a difficult concept. This is, as you might say, a master's level concept. And it takes some doing to wrap your head around it. And what I'm going to try to do in 20 minutes is sort of deliver to you sort of an hour and a half master's program seminar on surplus safety in 20 minutes. And you know why I can do it? Because you're really smart. All right, let's just follow me. Because along the way, I'm going to drop some breadcrumbs that'll maybe help you work with some new ideas that you're interested in. So part of this is about surplus safety, and part of it is how to think differently. One day, I'm with my friend, Dr. Judah Ranch, and we're sitting in a room with a blank white board. And we're both just sitting there staring at the blank whiteboard, and we're trying to think of things to think about. Now, this is the first lesson. We get so busy so much of the time that we forget to think. Happens all the time. And the good news for me and Dr. Ranch is we take time every now and then just to sit down and think. So the board is blank for a while, and then I sort of jump up and I write on the board the word safety. And here's why. Whenever everybody agrees, then everybody is wrong. And I was thinking, running through my mind, of what are things that everybody agrees on, and I think we can all agree, safety is important. Let's take the opposite side of that argument, and let me make this statement. In the field of aging services, safety is not important. Does that sound right to you? No, it's giving you a little tingly in your spidey sense, like, ah! Safety is important. We all agree. So my feeling then, and Dr. Ranch and I start and plunge in, my feeling is something's wrong with safety. And that's kind of, in one way, how I could even title this talk, Something's Wrong with Safety. So the first problem with safety is, once again, everybody thinks they know what it means. I mean, safety is keeping people safe. Safety is all around us. When we buckle in our safety belt in the car, we're keeping ourselves safe. The baby in the child seat in the car, safe. But really, actually, truthfully, safety is a subjective statement about risk. There's only such a thing as relative safety as long as you live. There's no such thing as absolute safety until you die. And then in the coffin, you are absolutely safe. But while you're alive, safety is what we call a fluid concept. Your level of safety varies all the time. And when we say something is safe or not safe, what we're really saying is that there's an acceptable amount of risk or there's not an acceptable amount of risk. Got that? So the first thing about safety is understanding that it's really a sloppy way of talking about risk. Now, everybody except even the people who live in town, everybody used some kind of conveyance to get here, whether it was an airplane or a car or a bicycle. And everyone was exposed to risk on their way here. Were you safe? Answer, that depends. And the thing it depends on is what's the acceptable amount of risk. I'll tell you a quick story. Years ago, I was taking lessons to be a pilot, and I had been referred to a very quirky pilot who had a very quirky plane that featured duct tape. And we went for a lesson, and it was a cold day, and the motor wouldn't start. So he says, never mind, never mind. He goes out, he gets a little box, stands on the box, and does this thing with a propeller. Starts the plane with a propeller. I'm sitting in the seat going, oh my God. I have a feeling if that guy had offered to fly you to Memphis, you might not have taken him up on it. You might have said, this is an unacceptable level of risk. So here's the next lesson. As you begin to think and talk about ideas and work on them, and as you begin to peel things back, you have to keep going. A lot of people will start with an idea or start with a concept, and they'll plunge in and they'll do a great job with it. But there's a level below that level. And in this case, a lot of you have already anticipated this. The question is, what is risk? Not the board game. What is risk? Risk is the probability that things will turn out differently than you expected. That's risk. So the probability or my expectation on that flying lesson was that I would return to the ground safely. And there was some probability that that would not happen. That was the risk. People are willing to accept higher and lower levels of probability based on, their appetite for or tolerance for risk. That's why safety as a concept is not as useful as you might think, because what's safe for one person may not be safe for another person. So there are a lot of people in this room who would have gotten out of the airplane, or who would not have gotten into the airplane in the first place when they saw the duct tape. So maybe I had a little higher appetite for risk, but there's people who have more appetite for risk than me, like the guy who jumped out of the balloon in space. I'm not going to do that. The probability that that would end differently than I expect is too high for me. But look at what we've done. We've taken safety from a binary concept. That's safe, that's not safe. And we've translated it into risk. And we've looked at risk as the probability that things will turn out differently than you expect. And we've concluded people have a different levels of appetite for that kind of risk. Now you might think, okay, great, we went below the surface, yes. But can you go another level down? Of course you can. Here's the next level down. Notice that I said, and I repeated it 3 times, I'm sure you noticed, risk is the probability that things will turn out differently than you expect. However, things can turn out worse than you expect, and things can turn out better than you expect. And those are 2 really different things. So when something the chance that something will turn out worse than you expect is called downside risk. The chance that things will turn out better than you expect is called upside risk. And as we'll see, a great deal of human progress actually requires upside risk. In fact, we're all descended from really crazy people who looked at a hill and asked the question, what's on the other side of that hill? And for many of our ancestors, crossing over that hill revealed a much more lush and beautiful and better place to live, that's called upside risk. And some of our not ancestors found a saber-toothed tiger on the other side of the hill. Downside risk and upside risk. Now let's look at the field of aging services and ask, how do we use the word risk in aging services? And what is the meaning that's being expressed when we talk about risk? And the answer is, it's all about downside risk. When you have a risk management committee, it's not a downside and upside risk management committee. It's really short for downside risk management committee. We're concerned about reducing the probability that things will turn out worse than we expected. Got me there? All right. So that's well enough, and you could say, okay, I gotcha, but safety is still important, and safety means reducing downside risk. And now I'm going to shift gears for a minute and talk to you a little bit about human development, and then we'll circle back to risk and we'll put it all together. You ready? All right. It turns out that the human nervous system requires a steady supply of upside risk in order to develop properly. And I'll give you a horrifying example of this in the negative. Years ago, there was a family, I guess you'd call them a family, of two parents and a child, and the parents were completely obsessed with the safety of their child. And so they forbade all visitors, kept the child in a room, isolated from everyone else. Then the child turned 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 7, and 9, and 12, and 13. And when the public authorities finally were aware of what's going on and intervened, they found a 13-year-old girl who could barely walk and barely speak, who had never been outside of that room in her life. Safe? Was she safe? Risk of being struck by a car. Risk of contracting chicken pox. Look at all the risk they had eliminated. Tremendous amount of risk. Falling off a swing. Heartbroken by mean boy in middle school. They had eliminated all of it. The problem with this is that they had failed to supply this young person with upside risk. And without an experience of the world that says, hey, this might turn out better than I expect. Without that input into her growing nervous system, she is now a ward of the state and is not capable of working or really interacting with others, as you could guess why. Without that risk, she wasn't able to develop normally as a human being. Got me? Now, what's obvious to all of us when we look at that in the context of a young person is equally true when it comes to older people. Older people need a steady supply of upside risk in order to grow. And here is where, this is the point of maximal danger, the point at which this all comes together in a single horrifying totality. Our culture expects older people to decline and stagnate and fail. That's the narrative. That's the what do you expect? Okay? So what happens in a whole society when, in an effort to keep older people safe, we remove not just downside risk, but upside risk from the lives of older people? What happens? They decline, they stagnate, they fail to grow. If anyone has ever seen this, they slouch in their chairs with their chins on their chest in the middle of the day. Has anybody ever seen that? Okay. What you're seeing is a person with an inadequate supply of upside risk. They might even have a lap belt on to decrease the downside risk. But the real problem is a lack of upside risk. So our cultural narrative endorses the toxic effect of removing upside risk from the lives of older people, and so makes it invisible. So there are some words for this, which I'll introduce. This approach results in something called excess disability. Look, if I'm 90, I'm going to have things that my body is not capable of doing at age 90. That's coming with the territory. Even if I age in a really healthy way, that's still true, okay? Excess disability is the disability I encounter and is imposed upon me by others. Excess disability is when a person moves into a nursing home, walks down the hall to their bed, moves their stuff in, and 2 weeks later is being pushed around in a wheelchair. That's excess disability. We create it. Excess disability happens when an elder needs some perhaps gentle assistance and cueing to get dressed, but a person dresses them anyway, and the person loses the ability to dress themselves and becomes more dependent. That's called. So one of the things that is a lifetime achievement I'm most proud of all of you and of the greenhouse, is that we do a better job than almost anyone else in America at preventing excess disability. You are incredibly good at that. Now let's flip over to surplus safety. So surplus safety can arise from multiple causes. The first cause of surplus safety, and that is removing so much risk from a person's environment that you're also removing upside risk and thereby damaging their nervous system. Okay? One of the first causes of surplus safety is the institutional rule that every person must be treated the same. And I know Carmen has some good, hard, interesting ways of looking at this, so I'm just going to give one quick example. If you have a July 4th picnic and a person is eating a hot dog, the hot dog gets caught in their trachea and they asphyxiate and die, what is the rule at the next July 4th picnic? Does everyone know? Now, that's no hot dogs for everyone. Okay? Actually, might actually be a good idea, but anyway, so this idea that everyone is treated the same violates basically every single thing we know about safety and risk and autonomy and dignity, and it makes everyone conform to a single standard that can, and that single standard can be very damaging to some people. Even while it may actually protect that person over there at the end of the table, it can be damage to the rest of the group. Next point about surplus safety. In order to have a vibrant organization, a vibrant team, a vibrant workplace, you have to try new stuff. If you work in a place that never tries new stuff, that's boring, and it's bad for you. And your nervous system can be damaged if you work in a place that doesn't try new things. Well, trying new things exposes you to risk because things could turn out different than you expect. And one possibility is this new thing you're trying could turn out worse than you expect. However, it could also turn out better than you expect. And that's where growth comes from. That's where we, as people and as organizations, flourish and grow. Last point, and bring Carmen up here. In our own, I talked about the workplace, but in our own lives, in our own families, we need risk. When a marriage rigorously avoids risk, it withers and dies. Okay? When a family avoids risk, it grows apart. And one of the ironies often remarked upon is how a very dangerous situation can actually reawaken passions in people and reawaken growth potential because they've just gotten shocked with risk. And people remember what that feels like. So, Carmen's coming up. Surplus safety. I've just given you the rocket course. Carmen's going to come in here and fill in the gaps.
Isn't he a great teacher? I admire those who don't need notes, don't you? I strive for that, but didn't happen. So, I don't know if you remember this, Dr. Thomas, but I was there in 2002, Gerontological Society on Aging in Denver, in the hall. You turned to Joanne Rader and said, "I've got it. I'm going to build small, intentional homes where people can live and have nursing care 24 hours a day. I'm going to create a new profession." And here you all are, the Shabazim. Congratulations. And then just look how God brought all this together. I hail from Colorado, and just a few weeks ago, I got to see my very first greenhouse in my state, in Loveland, thanks to the likes of Nancy Fox and Sandy Ransom and Vivage. Congratulations, you guys. It's very exciting. The 167th, right? In 27 states. Do I have it right? Congratulations, everybody. And I have to tell you, my daughter was there. She's 9, and it meant so much to me. We brought a friend from church, and it just meant so much to share it with people in my life outside of this, you know. And my little girl, Ellie, watched your video a couple years ago, and at the end she said, "Now that's a home." People get it at all ages, don't they? And congratulations on your first documentary, Homes on the Range. Anyone here from Sheridan, Wyoming? Congratulations, Wyoming. My husband hails from KC, which is right down the road, and we were engaged in KC, so it means a lot to me. So we have a big, and I just want to say thank you, NCB Capital. You are brilliant to bring this to our country and innovative, and how could we have done it without you? So here's the heart and soul of the issue, everybody. Does safety trump rights? Yes or no? Thank you, Nancy. I'm embarrassed to tell you that in our state of Colorado several years ago, a surveyor said publicly, safety trumps rights. Was she correct? Now, here's what I like to point out. It's not just because we don't think she's right. This is why she's not right, everybody. How many of you have been around long enough to remember In the survey system, in the regulatory system, at one point in time, we had what was called conditions A and conditions B. And conditions A were a higher severity level. They did trump conditions B. But since 1987, OBRA, all regulations are what? The same and equal. So we have a tag 323, preventing accidents, and we have a lot more tags on resident have the right to make choice. If you were my students, everyone, I would recommend you memorize the top 3 in my mind. Tag 242, the technical title, if you're talking to surveyors, is self-determination and participation. Many of us call it choices, however, because the text of the reg reads that residents have the right to make choices about aspects of their life that are significant to them. Choices. It also says residents have the right to choose, choose over their schedules. So whose schedule should it be? Yeah. And so choice is a strong, strong reg, everyone. The other one is 155, the right, who knows it? The right to what? The right to refuse treatment. So do residents have the right to refuse meds? You know, we're all quick to say yes, that's been around a while. Do residents have the right to refuse alarms? Do residents have the right to refuse that restricted diet? You know, hopefully you guys are leading the way on this. Nurses actually have so much power. Nurses in the room, your colleagues, remind them they have the power to call the doctor and tell him to what? Do you see that order? Dr. Al Power, in his book, Dementia Beyond Drugs, admits it. Nurse, who really writes physician orders, everybody? And it's no big secret, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. The nurses are there. Dr. Powers says, we need you. You're the eyes and ears for the physician. And so I'm starting to call them side effects of everything, everybody. A good nurse calls the doctor when there's side effects of medications and says, stop the medication. How many of our nurses are calling the doctor and saying, stop the restricted diet? Carmen's not eating. Have you ever met Carmen? How's she going to follow a no-salt diet? Have you ever met her? Hello, doctor. You know, if anyone knows me well, they know I like my salt, you know. One of the new standards in our new dining practice standards is that diet will no longer be determined by diagnosis only. How do you like that one? That's right. Come on. It's a sobering fact, isn't it, everyone, that it could be you or I, that some physician out there looks on a piece of paper and decides what we're going to eat. You know, I'm surprised we've allowed this long, everybody. So how many, oh, and here's the third, I think you call it the trump card reg, Nancy. Tag 151 says that anyone living in a nursing home has the very same rights as anyone living in the United States of America. And do you realize, everyone, if we truly lived up to that requirement, we wouldn't have needed the greenhouse model. We wouldn't have needed the culture change movement. So lean heavily on those 3 regs. Now, how many regs were there that are strong on resident rights to choose, to refuse? How many? How many on preventing accidents? So if anything trumps something else, what do you think trumps? That's what I think. Just do the math. And so now we have a bigger challenge, and that is to talk to surveyors about this. When they come in and cite this all the time, oh, you didn't prevent the fall. Oh, you didn't prevent this. Oh, you didn't prevent that. You know what we need to be saying, everybody? But what about this? We honored rights. We honored the right to refuse. Whose regs are they? They are CMS's regs. They are the surveyors are supposed to be upholding these regs, everyone. I'm getting tired of it. Anybody else? Where is this side of honoring choice? So we have to hold them accountable too. When they're in the home where you happen to work, they're holding you accountable to the regs. Do you realize we too need to hold them accountable to the regs? Don't forget that. So another interesting thing to think about is one time, Dr. Thomas, you said, actually on the webinar I do for Action Pact, you said that we are doing great violence to the person when we don't honor their choice. and honor their preferences. So, great violence, everyone. What's another word for that? How about neglect or abuse in our language of regs, right? 3 plagues of institutionalization, everybody. What's another word for plague? Disease, epidemic. Don't we do stuff about those things? Besides you all, who's talking about boredom, loneliness, and helplessness? Who's citing it? My dream is to get surveyors to cite it. How about you? And do you know where they could cite it? Tag 240 is quality of life. It fits perfect for boredom, loneliness, and helplessness. And I've talked to surveyors about it, and some are interested. So maybe someday we could see it. But surveyors are also honest, everyone. And they will, if you get them to be honest, I worked with surveyors in Colorado on a project. And the bottom line was this. Guess what's easier to cite? Physical harm or psychological harm? Physical. That's why we see more sites preventing pressure sores. It's a black and white issue, to be honest. They don't have the time. We would need to somehow also embed more time into discussing quality of life issues. How about tag 279, everybody? It's comprehensive care plan, but I don't see surveyors talking about this, citing this. I don't see a lot of us really living up to this either. And it says that the care plan is to identify the services that will be provided that help residents attain or maintain their highest practicable physical, mental, and psychosocial well-being. Use that in your back pocket as well as those strong resident rights regs. Now, surplus safety. Would you think that alarms are a good example of surplus safety? And how many of you have gotten rid of alarms in your greenhouse home? Congratulations. Woo! So certainly I'm going to go more into this in my next session if you'd like to come. But I just want you to realize, everyone, that the use of alarms is now a deficient practice at about 7 tags, if you ask me. I wrote a book about it, and see what you think. Think what regs come to mind that alarms would be now non-compliant with that requirement? Actually, restraints is one of them at 221, everyone. It says things like even a practice that restrains people is a restraint. How about, what else? Noise? How about dignity? How about the 3 we just went through? Choice. How many of you, right to refuse treatment? 151, same rights as any U.S. citizen. How many of you are asking your residents if they want their alarm? Okay, no hands. Because what would they say? Do you realize, everyone, that's the key? Start asking them. Lean on tag 155 and say, we're not going to do this to you anymore if you don't want it. If someone throws their alarm across the room, what'd they just tell you? Don't you think we should listen better? Me too. I also believe, everyone, that part of the way to deal with getting rid of this surplus safety problem is for you all to push your health departments. I think the crux of our movement now really is held by the surveyors. How about you? We actually have good regulations, but what it boils down to is what goes on during each survey. Would you agree? And when it feels unfair, when it feels not right, where are you on this side of things, surveyors? It's probably going to take all of us to work with our state coalitions. If you guys are not involved with your state coalitions, would you please get involved? Think about it. What good is a coalition of culture change if we're not going to push the envelope, if we're not going to ask for meetings with surveyors, if we're not going to say, hey, what about these? Hey, not in our state. We want it better in our state. Having been a surveyor, everyone, if you ask for a meeting with surveyors, guess what they have to say? They are civil servants. They are state employees. They cannot say no to you. We need to take that to our advantage and start asking for meetings and pushing the envelope and partnering better. I want to read something to you, everybody. Forgive me for reading, but it's going to be worth it. How many of you know Robert Kane and Rosalie Kane, leaders in really before this movement, leaders in the field of aging? And Robert Kane wrote this pretty quick article called Why Elder Care in America Isn't Working. And I believe everyone, unfortunately, this is our future. I have been researching and writing about long-term care of older people for almost 40 years. My epiphany came about 10 years ago when my mother had a stroke. My sisters and my 3-year adventure showed me that even with a dedicated caregiver, my sister, an expert case manager who knew lots of people in the field, me, that could be any of us, right? And a reasonable pool of financial resources, we could not get the care we wanted. If elder care doesn't work under those circumstances, I have to conclude that the system is broken. You can read about our frustrating encounters in an article, It Shouldn't Be This Way, The Failure of Long-Term Care, but a few observations are worth making here. America's elder care system is not a caring system. Underline that one. It is driven by caution instead of imagination. Safety is an overvalued commodity. As a result of risk aversion, older people are deprived of many activities and subjected to unnecessary suffering. Let me give you an example. Our mother had dementia, whether she had a fixation about needing to go to the bathroom all the time. It seemed driven by anxiety. She was living in an assisted living in Long Island, New York. Near my sister, she fell frequently. If she injured herself in any way, the risk-averse staff would call the EMTs, lest they be accused of neglect, and then someone else could manage the problem. EMTs are also risk-averse. Their response is to bring the patient to an emergency room for an evaluation. As a result, our mother would be taken by ambulance to the emergency room with bruises. Needless to say, she was not a high priority patient there. The assisted living would call my sister, who rushed to the emergency room to find this old lady, confused and agitated, lying on a gurney, screaming about needing to go to the bathroom. After each of these visits, it took several days for our mother to recover her cognitive function back to its baseline. We approached the assisted living and offered to sign a waiver of liability to avoid calling the EMTs unless there was evidence of a serious problem like a fracture. They said they could not do that because they would still be at risk and would be criticized by external regulators. So our mother became a frequent flyer to the ER, and we watched hopelessly. Another example, in the last months of her life, we lost our battle to keep our mother out of a nursing home. We found one that was reputed to be one of the best in the area. I visited the medical director, who knew me by reputation and was certainly eager to please us, even more so because we were paying privately. This was a full-service home with its own medical staff at clinics on site. They noticed that our mother occasionally choked while she was eating and were concerned about the risk of aspiration pneumonia from inhaling food into the lungs. They did a relatively simple test called a barium swallow that followed the food as it was ingested and discovered that she did indeed have swallowing problems. The response was to put her on a soft diet with thickened liquids. This meant that one of her few remaining pleasures now was removed. If you want a disgusting experience, try drinking thickened hot tea. Food is rendered both physically and taste-wise unpalatable. We met with the medical and nursing staff again and again, offered to sign waivers of liability in case of an inspirational event, and then he puts in parentheses, alas, not the good kind. Once again, they said they could not care for her unless she was on this terrible diet. In both instances, these were not mean or venal people. What does venal mean? Evil? Okay, not mean or having bad intent people. They were intimidated by fears of being seen as neglectful. They were at least in part the product of a regulatory system that has not been very effective and has certainly destroyed any lingering spirit of innovation. Frail older people are abused. They do need protection, but they also need the right to take informed risks. Simply dying with no bed sores is not the mark of a fulfilling end of life. We can and should be able to do better. That is why the first part of the title to our book is It Shouldn't Be This Way. This is what we're faced with, everybody. And this is our future. That could be my parents or your parents. And at some point in time, even though we know all this, we're at the mercy of them. And that's why we have to take it on a broader scale, don't you think? And do something in your states. Every state is dealing with the same issue, everybody. And if we don't do anything, we'll just talk about this next year, and we'll talk about it the next year. And I think there's an urgency to do something. And I would think that greenhouse homes, the Eden alternative, would lead the way, that you would not have alarms, that you would not have some of these markings of the institution. Let's take this as an example of surplus safety, everyone. CMS recently came out with a letter that said, what kind of eggs do you have to serve if you're going to serve sunny side up? Which way did they go? And here's the next thing, everyone. CMS contradicts itself when it says you must use pasteurized eggs. They're contradicting their own regulations now. See, where are we asking about this? It's the same as the hot dog issue. Grapes is an issue. One person, unfortunately, dies on a whole grape, and now no one can ever have a whole grape again, let alone a whole hot dog, right? I'm proud to tell you that in our new dining practice standards, we dealt with that issue, and we point that out, that when you make these blanket policies, you deny the choice, which is also a requirement of a nursing home certified for Medicare or Medicaid. We also make the point in our standards that the RDAs are generic and not individualized. And here's kind of a loophole, everybody. If you haven't, remembered this, CMS has given us a form of a loophole with tag 272, comprehensive assessment, and tag 279, comprehensive care plan. And so if I, let's say, I can't imagine this, would want small portions because so many of our frail elders do, and the big portions overwhelm them, that I should be quoted on your assessment papers, and I personally think everyone quoted on the care plan that I want small portions, end of story. There should be no issue in the kitchen that we must serve this portion size and they must get this much protein. Are you with me, greenhouses? And it's CMS's own system that we have the right to serve people by doing a comprehensive assessment and a comprehensive care plan. All right, what else? New big idea. I was with my buddy Karen Shaneman, some of you know her. She has a new big idea, and that is she's starting to dream about what she's calling a national culture change clearinghouse. She says, why should CMS get to make all the decisions? Isn't that good? Now, we've bought, the tale that, it's the truth that they put the money out, they have the regs. I get that. But why do they get to decide that no one ever gets to eat an egg again? How many of the people you serve have eaten fresh eggs their whole life? And they got to be 90, So there's a big idea. Maybe you guys could help make it happen. If you're not familiar with this, something new is coming out that you might be interested in. The Rothschild Foundation funded another task force, and it's almost final. They've put together a proposed process for care planning for resident choice and forms then that will help us honor resident choice and mitigate risks. So be watching for that. It'll be coming out anytime. How many of you have read the new dining practice standards? Raise your hands. Yay, thank you so much. Have any of you purchased the new toolkit to go with it? We developed a toolkit, the Pioneer Network, put together another task force. People were asking us, who has implemented the new standards? Can we get their policies and procedures? So we put together model policies and procedures that follow the standards. We put together brochures for residents and families to help them understand regular diet instead of all these restricted diets, the research that backs it, that at an older age your body doesn't assimilate the food like it once did, and it's not affecting the blood pressure and the blood sugars like it did at a younger age. It's all there. We did tip sheets for professionals, just trying to help everyone. And I wanted to tell you about one resource in particular in the new toolkit that we called the Informed Choice Form. And what we did on this form, everybody, is we kind of repeated it over and over that this toolkit, this form, is trying to help the nursing home do this: prevent accidents as well as honor resident rights. And we list these regulations. These are requirements, everyone, of your nursing home to do all of it and to do a good balance of it. Dr. Thomas, you've talked about the teeter-totter, that it's got to be a balance. And so everyone, this is our future too, that we've got to honor the informed choice while we mitigate risks the best we can. And that's lingo now from our new standards of practice, dining standards. We put it on the form. The term informed choice is from CMS. So we thought it would be wise to use lingo that CMS itself uses. It comes out of tag 325, everyone, the right to informed choice. I would say we should add it over here. How about you? And so on this form, we help put it on paper that perhaps there are several different options. What's option A? What are the potential risks and what are the potential benefits? We tried to go with upside and downside, but it confused people. I'm so sorry, I tried. And option B, what are the potential risks? What are the potential benefits? Because there's both to every choice, right, everyone? And then the form just proceeds with collecting all the data. What's the physician's review of different assessments and evaluations? But in the end, it says, what is the resident deciding, period? And then it says, what are we all agreeing to do to mitigate the risk? And then what needs to go on, what are we going to monitor? What makes sense to keep track of for this person and this issue? And then now this information has been transferred to the care plan. So please go get that form. Hopefully it will help. How many of you have learned that waivers aren't working? And what I've learned from the lawyers is the word waiver itself. Here's where language fails us. Waiver, the word waiver, the court of law is looking at it as us saying we waive our responsibility to keep people safe. And that's not what we're saying either. So we have to get better at showing. Let's take it as an example. I don't want to have pureed food. Anyone else? I refuse pureed food. So this is going to be lots of us, really, moving forward. So Carmen, you refuse pureed food. What would the next logical thing be to offer me, everyone? You want to honor my choice, but you also want to mitigate the risk of choking. What's next? So the way I've learned to say it, really, is to offer me real food, but finely chopped, rather than ground. Anyone want ground? Anyone want ground for lunch? Sometimes these words, I think, are also doing us in. And so this actually comes from AMDA, the American Medical Directors Association. They have pointed out two really important things. If someone is on a pureed diet, everybody, grow your list of foods that are naturally pureed. Grow the list. Offer more things, like mashed sweet potatoes, not just mashed potatoes, right? The thicker soups. Creme brulee. So I met a dietitian once. You know what she said? If I ever have to be on puree, just give me cheesecake. Isn't she smart? So greenhouses, grow your list of foods that are naturally of a pureed consistency. These are the doctors talking. And secondly, they say finely chopped foods retain the flavor and are equally well handled by people. Isn't that great? So what have you done? You've honored my choice to not have pureed, and you've mitigated risk. And you can show the health department that you tried to do all these things that you're required to do. Not just this, right? This too. And then in the court of law, and then with everyone's worry of lawsuits, our new dining practice standards also try to point out that if you do this well, and what I mean is like in the team, so let's say here we are at care conference and all the right people are there and we all hear what the person wants and the daughter's there and she hears what the person wants and we all agree on how to mitigate risk and it doesn't even matter if we agree, to be honest. We all come to terms with what the person wants and we have an agreement, I guess, of what's going to happen next. If that daughter's there and signed the papers and she tries to sue you later, I think it's not going to go well for her because now we have evidence she was there. She heard what her mom chose. Does that make sense, everyone? And so we're just trying to help you do what's in your heart to do to prevent all this surplus safety. Good. Now, Dr. Judah Ronch also says, doesn't safety include being able to make my own choices? How safe would you feel if you couldn't make any choices for your own self? But that's what's happening. Another story, a friend of mine, her dad moves to the nursing home. It's her stepdad, and he had ice cream his whole life, every night. Anybody else? Ice cream before bed, his whole life. Had diabetes. Do you suppose he can have ice cream now in the nursing home before he goes to bed? Oh no. So just think of Tony, who had ice cream every night his whole life until he moves into the nursing home and dies without his ice cream every night. This just can't be. Here's another definition of culture change, everyone. Someone told me not long ago, I think culture change is that your life doesn't change. Anybody like that? You can do that. All right, let me close up here with my thoughts, and then we're going to open it up to you guys. I would hope that language is a part of your journey, greenhouses, to do it different and to do it better, and that you're moving away from admitting and discharging. And you know, how many of you were admitted to the house you live in? How many of you were discharged from the last house you lived in? And please, greenhouses, if anybody, let's stop referring to beds. Anybody with me? Anybody tired of it? So who really lives there? People. And where does beds come from? It comes from your license on the wall, everyone. And it sounds sort of highfalutin. It's the language of our work to say beds, right? It's like, you know what you're talking about, or admission and discharge. And yet, we don't have to, right? In fact, you guys are the leaders, Dr. Thomas, Eden Alternative, to move to real language. How about activities? Are you getting rid of activities? I hope. You know, really think about it. That's an institutional word. What are activities? And I know you're helping people just live real life, engage with life, living life. I love, Dr. Thomas, learning from you that we need to talk more about life and living and less about care. And so you guys are in the perfect position to do that. Recently, I've been hearing things like, are you offering classes to people if we're developing at all ages? I've heard of homes that are inviting the elders to give lectures about things that they know about. We all know about something, right? I've heard of the people who live there being the event planners. Who needs an activity director? She could just be in the background, or he, you know, the guide, like you guys do. And community life certainly gets at it better than the word activities, where people live, grow, and develop. So I'll close with this. It was so neat to see you, Dr. Thomas, and Steve Shields at the Pioneer Network to be our opening and closing leaders of our field. I love that. It's honoring to you, and we want to learn more from you. And let's see, Steve said on day one, was he first, I think? And you were, he said, time is up, everybody. Time is up. And then Dr. Thomas, you said, we've got to get comfortable with feeling incompetent. We don't always know how to do this. You just said that a bit ago. And I want to tell you, I had Steve Shields on my show recently, and he said the same thing. As he approached Liberty Hospital in Missouri to become one of the first healthy living communities, intentional communities, where we might live, everyone, where there's retail, where there's all levels of health care, he said, I didn't know what I was doing. I just approached the hospital and said, how can we partner? And so I know that you all are seeking to do that as well. Time is up. So my time's up too, I think. With that, do you want to add anything? And then we'll pass the mic around. Thank you. Okay, do you want to add?
So this is a wonderful person and leader in the field, and I love the way we were able to go from ideas and concepts, that's what I did, to very specific application. And I think this is what makes Greenhouse different. Certain parts of the world, in like academics and so on, they only deal with the concepts, and other parts just do follow the rules and regs. Greenhouse, Eden Alternative, culture change, we try to put them together, and you saw that today with us.
Can we do it again tomorrow?
Let's do it again tomorrow. So there's a few minutes left, and I would wonder if there was a question for either of us or comments about, here we go.
Run.
You mind, Susan?
This is very near and dear to me, as I just received a harm level deficiency, G, last week for failure to keep somebody safe. And we got an extra bonus, failure to thoroughly investigate. So I got a D and a G, all associated with a lady who made it very clear she didn't want to use the alarm. We had placed her in our hearth with our Shabazz in the kitchen area because you couldn't stay close to her. If you followed behind her, she'd turn around and see you, and she'd run and she'd fall. If you tried to bring her walker, she'd pick it up, throw it at you, and fall. So we literally had a 5-page safety care plan, one of which was perhaps a chair alarm might be useful when she's not within sight. We brought her out to the hearth area in a wheelchair with the alarm. She moved herself to another chair. And of course, if you tried to say, oh, no, no, stand up, I got to do this, so we respected that. The Shabazz turned around to take the buns out of the oven. She jumped up within 30 seconds, ran into the office, turned around, fell, broke her hip, died a month later, and now I have this deficiency. So I would very much appreciate, I think it's very clear when somebody's able to say, I don't want that, get rid of it. But when we're faced with our demented elders, and you have, in this case, 10 children, of course, somebody in that crowd was not going to be happy with us. And it also opens us up to the lawsuit to sue us now for killing their mother. Mm-hmm. And it just kills me that we tried to do something. And I also see the challenge with our surveyors. We started out with a team that have all retired, and now we have a group that are like, what do you people think you're going to do? Yep. And I'm finding it very difficult. I thought we kind of passed the hurdle, and now it's like a higher hurdle is in front of us. Yeah. Just some thoughts.
Yes. Oh, I'm so sorry, everybody. You know, first of all, would the alarm have prevented the fall? So the alarm's not the answer.
Attentiveness, or so we thought, to show the attentiveness that there were actually two Shabazz
film.
within the vicinity watching, trying to not be noticed by the elder that they were watching. And they said, well, we didn't see in 15 minutes once that you tried to put that alarm under her. And I didn't address the alarm in the investigative review because I thought it was clear in the care plan that we said we wouldn't add to the agitation. So they dinged me for not commenting on it.
Before I forget, everyone, I forgot to say this. Guess what? Even under tag 323 accidents, there's a line that says, alarms do not replace necessary supervision. So that's our line with surveyors. Surveyors, why are you promoting them? We have so much evidence now that actually alarms are contributing to falls, everybody. The research is in that if you get rid of alarms, you'll actually see fall rates plummet. Whereas we've been using alarms for 15, 20 years, we haven't seen that. So we're going to have to get savvy with sharing this information. In Minnesota, everybody, they did a study. They started to find this out. They called the health department right away to share the information. I'm sorry, but that's the key. We have to educate them. Think about this. Surveyors are not getting out to conferences. Do you see any? And it's not their fault. The state budget system doesn't allow them, but that could be you or me, not getting out to any conferences. So my advice to you is to bring the education to them. Just offer. They need education. And they got CEUs to keep track of too, you know? And so one idea would be to bring it to them. Here's something else to consider. At tag 323, get this. There's a line that says, not all accidents are preventable. Accidents happen. Isn't that true? That's a good line, right? 2 lines later, it says, the facility is responsible for preventing all accidents. It's contradictory, everybody. And here's my question. The surveyors tend to focus on this line, right? Why don't they focus on this line? Accidents do happen. Nancy wants to add something, and Bill?
I just looked up the definition of accident. And it says an unfortunate incident that happens unexpectedly and unintentionally. I think we need to challenge CMS on the idea that accidents are preventable. By their very definition, they are not preventable.
If you notice on many press reports where they used to report car accidents, do you know what word is now used? Crashes. So a car crash because of the very same issue. I'd like to add one thing here that I can't tell you how much I admire your transparency and your honesty. This is a group of very loving and supporting people, and you just put yourself out there and really told a story that's very difficult. And I think you're going to find that you have a lot of support among the people in this room, and it's that kind of honesty and risk-taking behavior that you just engaged in. It's ultimately going to lead us into a better direction.
May I ask, do you plan to take it to IDR? Yes? Good. So yes? you
Yes,
are.
but we feel like it's weak. We just feel like we hear everybody loses an IDR.
Well,
and if
maybe-
nothing else, we didn't want the lawsuit to hold as much weight potentially. If the Department of Health said you screwed up, guys, then of course the facility is going to be. So that was the main reason, thinking we're going to lose, because we didn't know how to argue it.
Did you submit it already?
I believe he submitted it on Monday.
If he didn't, get those 4 strong regs
Yeah,
in there.
I'm just thinking, damn, I wish I talked to you yesterday.
Should have been yesterday. Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, personally, everyone, it's just my little opinion. But if we don't argue them, then how can we move forward? I know it's a lot of time and energy, and I hear people say we just chose not to do it. But I do think there's value, even if you lose, to do the IDR process. And you know what? Where's the lawyers sticking up for this too, you know? Don't you all have access to lawyers? So let's get them fighting for us on this too. Yes.
Good morning. I want your thoughts and opinions on how do you bridge the gap between something like diet liberalization and resident choice and speech therapists and physicians that are concerned about their license and they're taught to follow the test results. And then, you know, we as dietitians and clinical support team push for that resident choice, but then are overwritten by the physicians.
Well, I'll just say from the physician's point of view, a lot of it has to do with what we were just seeing here. There are, in the world of the physician, there are certain expectations, actually not supported by evidence, of customary practice. So what you're running into is customary practice. And in order to get that, any change in that, assuming you have a handful or a few physicians that are at the issue here, is to work with a local medical librarian or some academic center or your professional association to get papers that show a new standard of practice that validate the argument you're making. That's one piece of changing physician behavior. And so often, people will, I'm saying this is with my doctor hat on, people will say to me, you know, you should do this or you should do that, but I have an education and I have a license that requires me to follow a standard of practice. So it's not about convincing me, it's about giving evidence that the standard of practice is not A, it's actually B.
I don't have any licenses, but here's what I've heard a speech therapist with a license say. She's been a speech therapist in Colorado for 23 years, so I'll just plant the seed. She says, if you know someone will never follow that restricted diet, don't do the eval. Because what does the eval do, everybody? It triggers everything in motion, and it's hard to undo. So I think there's wisdom in that. How about you?
And I'll just say, if I could, we're near the end. You know, our daughters, Haley and Hannah, have difficulty with swallowing, and they've never had a barium swallow. Wow. Because, you know, we've made a judgment about their quality of life that has to do with their desire to eat food.
There it is.
And so the barium swallow was never ordered.
So everyone, bottom line, don't let this story scare you. The alarm would never have prevented the fall anyway. Greenhouses, I can't wait for you to be the leader to get rid of such things as alarms, restricted diets, And I so admire your work. Thank you for letting me be with you today, and God bless you.
Thank you.